In my panel now, Ashley Parker, White House reporter for The Washington Post, Zerlina Maxwell, director of progressive programming for SiriusXM, and a former aide to the Hillary Clinton campaign, and Evan Siegfried, a Republican strategist here in New York with us. Great to have all of you guys with us. So picking up on that last piece of data there, Ashley, are you surprised that McConnell is going ahead with the vote without knowing that it is going to be a solid 100% success?
Yes and no. Leader McConnell, he's very savvy. He often knows a bit more than he lets on. And so it is a true mix, though. There is some nervousness about not quite knowing where everyone falls, especially it's worth singling out Senator Murkowski. She all along has been sort of the biggest wild card, at least from Republican leadership's point of view on this, in part just because she very much keeps her own counsel and has not given many clues as to where she is. But you have to imagine, and this cautious optimism is what I'm hearing from people inside and outside the White House as well, that while Leader McConnell may not know 100% exactly where this falls, that he would not be going ahead with this unless he was at least fairly confident that 70 or 80% that Peter was just mentioning.
So, Evan, I want to actually play this soundbite. This is Chuck Grassley just this morning on Fox News. Here's what he had to say about Judge Kavanaugh.
12 years on the D.C. Circuit Court, 307 decisions. What is there about this person that he shouldn't be on the Supreme Court? No, his qualifications have not been at issue. Everything that's been at issue is secondary things.
Now, here's the irony. You had a former Supreme Court Justice, John Paul Stevens, literally say that the thing that made him change his mind about Judge Kavanaugh wasn't necessarily all the stuff that has come out, not the sexual allegation stuff, but it was precisely his temperament. So is it fair to say that Chuck Grassley is simply wrong in saying that these are all secondary issues and not significant enough?
Well, I think that really we've been talking about sexual assault a great deal. And when Judge Kavanaugh went to Congress to testify a second time about Christine Ford's allegations, he did show a side that worried professional court watchers. I come from actually working in the federal judiciary, where it's not about partisanship. It's about calling balls and strikes. And judges I know were also equally horrified. Well, I don't think Justice Stevens, it was appropriate for him to speak out, just like I don't think it was appropriate for Judge Kavanaugh to write that op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. It doesn't work. But can we get to something bigger here? Today is the one-year anniversary of the Me Too movement. And President Trump's tweet this morning just made it harder for Jeff Flake to vote yes. And we're also seeing the president last night mocking the Me Too movement. He mocked Dr. Ford earlier in the week. What are we sending as a message to women that are not Republican women? Are we saying, we don't believe you? He's saying, oh, yeah, it's professionally organized smear campaigns when a woman comes forward and says, I was sexually assaulted or harassed. That's just morally wrong.
What do you think that message is then? I'll pose
the message that we're sending?
Yeah.
The Republican Party doesn't really care about you. When we're seeing Republican focus groups come back and see Republican women are actually saying they're more concerned about their sons and husbands getting accused of sexual assault or harassment than their own daughters being victims of that.
So let me then just push this back a little bit at you and say that how do you then explain that in the last couple of weeks since the president has gone on the offensive with mocking Dr. Ford, with refraining from making any comments about her personally, to attacking her personally and attacking these women, that it's energized the Republican base and has narrowed the gap in some of these midterm polls that we're seeing?
Well, if that's energized the Republican base, but you have to ask, how big is the base actually?
Okay.
And what's it doing to independents? Already Democratic women are fired up, and the Republican Party has had a huge gender gap for years. And we're only going to make it worse in the long term. It might help for now, but once this story is out of the news, I don't know how much staying power it has.
All right, so Zerlina, then let me ask you about these four undecided senators. Different stories. You got Joe Manchin, West Virginia. Others are Republican. Jeff Flake leaving at the end of this term. Walk us through what you think they're going through. How are they calculating this? Is it purely politics, or is there an element of this that could possibly be conscience-driven?
I think there's actually a conscience-driven element, and we saw that yesterday with Heidi Heitkamp, because, you know, the latest polls in North Dakota show she's down double digits, potentially. And so she's said that she is voting no because it's the right thing to do. She listened to Dr. Ford, she found her testimony credible, and she believes her. And I think that each of these four senators have to ask themselves that question. if you just take Dr. Ford's testimony in isolation. Leave out his hysterics in the afternoon. Just look at her testimony, and is it credible? Do you believe her? And if you can watch that testimony and walk away and say, I believe her, then he doesn't belong on the bench. It's a simple question. And if you do believe her, then you cannot vote for him, because you're essentially saying women don't matter, our voices don't matter, and when we come forward with our stories of sexual assault, that they're irrelevant in the context of politics.
Ashley, I know you got to run, so let me ask you really quickly. I know that you pointed out that while Kavanaugh basically apologized for his emotional testimony in that Wall Street Journal op-ed, the president ironically loved his tone when he was actually, taking that second round of questioning with Dr. Blasey Ford last week. Why do you think he felt the need to apologize in this op-ed or try to downplay or kind of, walk back that aggressiveness that he came out with in a statement that he had written prior to taking those questions from the senators?
Right, and that's a good point as well, that he sort of couches this, and again, maybe less an apology and more just an explanation of potentially problematic behavior. He couches this as in the passion of the moment, but it is worth reminding people that he, as he said himself, he sat down and wrote that in advance of delivering it. But that sort of gives you a sense of the challenges that just about everyone in President Trump's orbit have to walk. The key person you are performing for and the key person who often matters is that audience of one, the president himself. Judge Kavanaugh knew that the president was quite disappointed in his Fox News interview earlier that week, where he felt like he had been weak and not really forceful enough, and that the president wanted a display of sort of righteous anger and indignation. And that's what he delivered, with some pretty clear partisanship sprinkled through. That said, the president, what he wants is often quite different than what voters want, than what even Republican lawmakers want. And certainly in this case, Judge Kavanaugh realized that in addition to the problem of the allegations of sexual assault, he also had a problem with this core group of senators who are saying, look, in addition to all of that, there may be temperamental problems with him on the judiciary. I may be uncomfortable voting for someone so partisan. And so he's sort of satisfied that one master, the president, and then he had to go out and kind of try to explain it all away to these other people who actually today and tomorrow determine his fate.
Yeah, and he seems like he's actually trying to make an argument to these 4 senators that were worried about his temperament. Zerlina, let me ask you really quickly about these protesters taking place on Capitol Hill. I want to play you this soundbite. Obviously, we had the president at the top of this hour literally tweeting out saying they were very rude elevator screamers. He referenced them as paid professionals, being paid for by people like George Soros, saying that these posters were not made in the basement out of love. That is in addition to Chuck Grassley this morning. Take a listen.
We as senators ought to be setting examples for civility, not encouraging incivility. You've heard about the resistance since November 2016. You're seeing the resistance headquarters right here on Capitol Hill, all among Democrats.
So that was a bit of a head scratcher. We're still trying to figure out what's up with the resistance there.
I don't know why he's saying it with the accent.
The South Park movie.
It's very bizarre.
Is that a reference to something we don't know? Maybe a culture.
All
right.
I think what's happening in Capitol Hill is you see women who are very angry. Every single woman I talked to in the past 5 days is filled with rage, uncontrollable rage, the incandescent right beneath the surface, because what we're hearing from Dr. Ford and other women, it mirrors our own experiences. Women go through this every single day. We're always thinking about ways to protect ourselves from male violence. And so for male senators, all white, all 80 years old, standing up there and basically telling us that we're hysterical and we should calm down, it just makes us more angry. And so these are not funded protests. These are women who are flying from Alaska, coming from Maine to go to D.C. to tell their senators their stories. And I think that that's part of the democratic process. If we're not going to listen to women, then are we second-class citizens in this country? If we're not going to take our stories seriously and actually try to prevent a credibly accused rapist, sexual abuser, to be in the highest court in the land that's going to impact policies for women for generations to come.
Yeah, it's incredibly.
that's the question
It's
that we're
incredibly
facing right
dismissive,
now.
regardless of how you feel about the politics. To hear the way Senator Ornhanch was telling him, like, when you grow up, I'll talk to you. All right, guys. Zerlina Maxwell, Evan Siegfried, stick around for us. We're going to talk to you guys a lot more in the program. Up next, a new Pentagon report paints a concerning picture of defensive vulnerabilities, and it actually says that China is looking to take advantage of that. This, as the Trump administration takes aim at Beijing over claims of election interference, claims the intelligence community is silent on.